from the comfort of knowing that their crimes will never be revealed in a courtroom. Several others have talked about costs or societal costs. During my 4.5 decades of law-related public service, most of which was spent either as a judge, an assistant prosecutor, and for up to last January, the 19 years preceding, as the District Attorney of Philadelphia. It should come as no surprise to this committee that I've had the unique experiences of meeting thousands upon thousands of victims, witnesses, and defendants. So many have had woeful tales to tell. I have seen more evil than even the most cynical among us would ever have imagined existed. Nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for a class of victims that I came to know during the more than 5 years that my office investigated sexual abuse by clergy in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Having come to know the stories of these victims and the terrible price they all had paid and will continue to pay was stunning to me. These people were in the truest sense survivors. I've never seen a more beaten down, depressed, or sadder group of people in my life. In other words, they weren't seeking vengeance or money. They were seeking to be allowed to let the truth come out and the perpetrator be revealed. An instructive inquiry should be, for this committee amongst others, what's the price that the victims that this legislative body, through the passage of various bills from the state budget and society, pays for the terrible toll of sexual violence? One manifestation is that many states have recognized the tremendous number of cases of this kind and have not only lengthened the statute of limitations, but also required that those who have care and or supervision of children are now designated as mandated reporters to law enforcement of any acts, including sexual abuse, assault, and exploitation. Megan's laws, or similar kinds of laws, sex registries, and specialized probation and parole officers are now employed and trained for this specific purpose, to monitor and control the actions and locations of sexual predators. Enforcement of these laws and the associated price tag of electronic home monitoring, GPS devices, and the like, so that every one of these predators' whereabouts is known, are at additional cost to the public. The maintenance and repair of this expensive equipment are a new part of the legislative landscape all over this country. Child Protective Services agencies have been formed by the scores in every state, and therapy groups abound. Long-term psychiatric and or drug therapy for offenders continues to expand. The general public, the courts, and taxpayers all pay for these services, usually over a long period of time. Damage to children's victims can last over a lifetime. Indeed, outward effects may not come to the fore, as you have heard, until these young people become adults, where the costs can be heavy indeed. Probably the first sign or manifestation of this trauma are deep feelings of guilt, shame, and remorse. Children feel that they are somehow responsible for the horror that has been visited upon them. They don't often reveal what has transpired because some are too young to appreciate every aspect of just what has happened, or suffer the same intense shame that you have heard about, or feelings of betrayal or fear or blame. Who would believe their word over the word of a priest? It's a common thread running through sexual abuse by clergy. These words were often uttered by the priest himself during the sexual conquests, and they became a truism. For many children who dare to tell their devout parents, or who may depend on the church for help or even salvation, disbelief by parents is common, as is rejection, beatings, and other trauma for the, quote, terrible lies the child told against Father X or Y. Depression, weight loss, aggression, post-traumatic stress disorders, sleeplessness are common, as are plunging grades, truancy, acting out, resort to alcohol, drugs, or both. Suicidal ideation or attempts, as well as suicide, are also a common thread, as are some other aspects, such as children continuing to relive the abuse over and over again like a never-ending tape of the horrific events in their brains. Adolescent males are especially horrified that another male had had sexual contact with them. Girls suffer from feeling of being dehumanized, violated, used, or dirty. Some others tend to blame themselves for not resisting stronger or revealing the predator's acts and identities sooner. Many children have been beaten and subjected to sadistic mistreatment during the sexual assaults. Some youths were passed around among other priests for the sexual or sadistic gratification of each of them. Children often watched as priests groomed their younger siblings, in turn or serially assaulted other children in the household at the same time. The psychological, psychosexual, and psychiatric problems can be overwhelming and may not always respond to treatments and intervention. Much of the costs associated with treatments of all kinds for children of sexual abuse, no matter whom the perpetrators are, will be, or were, are borne by the public. Every child who drops out, who doesn't develop or maintain proper social controls, becomes one less person out of the workforce, may be on welfare, SSI, Medicaid, or other support for life, all paid for by us. Children who suffer sexual trauma are often distrustful, sullen, unable to form bonds of trust and friendship that last. These kinds of children, wounded in their youth, remain wounded in their adulthood. Whatever form the manifestation of sexual abuse, internal or external to the youngster, all are paid for one way or the other by the public. Parental regret, trauma, depression, and other psychological damages in the family are caused by feelings that somehow the parents were responsible for not realizing that their entire family has been serially sexually violated by their clergyman, whom the parents had welcomed into their home or entrusted with their children for special trips. Why didn't I see this? How could I have not suspected what was going on? Intense feelings of loss, betrayal, and emotion and trauma are common. Parents can also suffer great emotional, physical, or psychological or other problems needing therapy. Still others are never quite the same and suffer for the rest of their lives. For jurists and legislators, it is quite common to have lists of perpetrators who come before the courts who are charged with sexual crimes involving domestic violence, interpersonal violence, sexual assault, and other crimes. These perpetrators are determined by prosecutors and jurists to have been victims of the same or similar criminal acts committed upon them when they were sexually victimized as children. Our jails and prisons and treatment programs under court supervision are filled with defendants who are drug, alcohol addicted, who became that way to forget or sublimate the memories of sexual abuse. Many of these former victims cycle through the criminal justice system for life. This is not to say that every victim of childhood sexual predation will become a social outcast, a psychiatric patient, a heartless, remorseless serial killer or psychopath. The small miracle of this is that many victims in time and with therapeutic interventions are able to become fully functional and productive members of our society. Somehow, they have been able to develop the tools to cope and normalize their lives, get married and have children and the like. All of them, however, bear the lifelong scars and are often haunted by what was so dreadfully awry in the church that these predators were chosen for protection and absolution, while the children were so cavalierly thrown away. Members of the committee and the legislature as a whole, you have the power to help stop these crimes from being covered up, no matter who commits them. Individuals, family members, close members of a person's social group, clergymen of every stripe, or people unaffiliated or having nothing to do with religion. You can help these victims and society bring some of these dark and heinous crimes to light and keep the confidences of the public as you help to heal victims. I urge you to do so by approving this message, and I thank you this measure, and I thank you very much for asking me here today.
Stackhouse. Thank you, and good morning. Good morning, Chairman Lenthal and Assemblywoman Markey, and thank you for the invitation to speak this morning. And I would certainly be remiss if I didn't thank Judge Lynn Abraham for the opportunity that she gave me to work in really what is a terrific prosecutor's office in Philadelphia. And also thank you to our current district attorney, Seth Williams, on whose behalf I speak today. I've been a criminal prosecutor for 13 years and have personally handled hundreds of child sexual abuse cases during that time. I'm here today to speak about the devastating impact that these crimes have on their victims and the effect this devastation has on their ability to disclose this abuse. As was mentioned, in Pennsylvania, victims of childhood sexual abuse have until their 50th birthday to disclose abuse in order to allow criminal prosecution of that abuse. Until 2006, the statute of limitations in Pennsylvania permitted criminal prosecution of child abuse cases up until the victim turned 30 years of age. What we found in Pennsylvania, however, was that that 30-year-old mark was not sufficient. In our collective experience, it became evident that middle age and the life events that often accompany middle age lead many victims of childhood sexual abuse to attempt to reconcile their past with their present. Having a parent pass away or your children grow into adulthood causes victims to reflect on their upbringing. Traumatic circumstances as well often are the triggers that begin victims on a path of dealing with their childhood trauma. The vast majority of sexual abuse of children is committed by adults who are in a position of authority and trust regarding the child. Whether a family member, a teacher, coach, or other similar father figure in the child's life, the perpetrators of this abuse gain the trust of the child in order to isolate them and then abuse them. This isolation is both physical, when abusers manipulate situations to babysit children, for example, and emotional, using grooming behavior to break down social norms the child may have regarding the adult-child relationship. This isolation and subsequent abuse of trust are the very reasons why victims of childhood sexual abuse do not disclose their abuse. They are afraid they won't be believed. They feel guilt or humiliation for having been coerced into participating in sexual activity as a child. They may even have developed feelings of loyalty towards their offender that causes them to keep their secrets. The damage done, however, by this abuse has profound effects on a child's psyche. It shakes to the core a victim's faith in society itself. This damage causes confusion, resentment, and anger. These are feelings that build up and oftentimes go unaddressed for decades. All too often, this leads to abuse of drugs or alcohol and problems with trust in relationships. Thus, we have found that events such as entering drug rehabilitation or divorce are also often precursors to disclosure of childhood sexual abuse. Accordingly, I encourage passage of the legislation under consideration and would encourage future consideration of increasing the age at which the statute of limitations for sexual offenses against minors commences. From a prosecutorial point of view, such legislation does not overly burden the criminal justice system and does not provide false hope of criminal conviction for victims of childhood sexual abuse. Complaints will still need to be investigated and cases developed before determining whether there is sufficient reliable evidence upon which to proceed with a criminal prosecution. When prosecutions are brought on these so-called delayed disclosure cases, prosecutors will no doubt have their work cut out for them. But achieving justice is still possible. In fact, in my experience, when an adult takes the witness stand during a criminal jury trial and testifies about their childhood sexual abuse and the experiences they had growing up enduring such abuse, a powerful sense of obligation comes over the courtroom. The members that may be watching the jury trial, certainly the members of the jury, judges and other staff. This testimony, I firmly believe, can be some of the most compelling evidence a prosecutor can present to a jury in any type of case. Criminal convictions of sexual predators are secured, certainly, with this, such testimony. And if I may, I want to take a moment just to go off my prepared remarks for a moment to speak to what I see as the real impact that what you, Assemblywoman Markey, and the rest of your colleagues are attempting to do, the impact of increasing the statute of limitations. If nothing else, I think that it will give victims of childhood sexual abuse the access, certainly the access that they deserve to, whether it be civil court or criminal court. And I think of two examples of cases that I prosecuted rather recently. One of a young man that I met a few years ago 19 years old when he came into my office to talk about the abuse that he had endured at the hands of his